Okay, so evaluating expression means you need to pay attention what variables are equal to, which is h is equal 3 and j is equal 2. Okay, so you need to replace those variables with these number values. For example, for the first one, h, it says 3. So instead of h, you need to plug in 3 and minus, and instead of j, you need to plug in the value of the j, which is 2. Okay, so 2, and then you need to evaluate. Evaluate means calculate. So 3 minus 2, and it becomes 1. It's the same thing for the second one. And the first letter is G, and instead of G, you need to plug in the value of that G letter. So which is equal 12, right? It's right here. It says G equal 12. So you're going to put 12, and there is a plus sign in between. And the second letter is H. Instead of H, now think about what variable you have. The H is equal 8, okay? So you're gonna replace H with number 8. And now you can evaluate this expression, which is add them up. 12 plus 8, that becomes 20, okay? And next one, it says, so when it becomes a negative numbers, you guys have to be very, very careful. As you see in the first two examples, every time when I replace a letter with a number, I use the parentheses so that I can clearly see that the subtraction is between these two things. And it's very useful when you use a parentheses. It's because when the negative numbers comes, you're not going to get confused, or you're not going to get mixed up with the signs, because there is a plus sign in between. And the first letter is G. I'm going to open empty parentheses. Second letter is H. Okay, so the first number is G, and it's a negative 7. Instead of G, I'm going to plug in negative 7. So the second letter is H, and it's equals negative 3. I'm going to plug in, or I'm going to replace letter H with negative 3. And then you're going to do the addition. So when you use your calculator, it's just a negative 7 plus negative 3. And that becomes negative 10. Okay, and the next one, evaluate the expression for when G equal 3 and H equal negative 13. Okay, so now you have like kind of different one compared to other examples. So G and H are together. Being together means they're multiplied. For example, like this parentheses number multiplied with this parentheses number. So G and H. So instead of G, you need to put 3. Instead of H, the second letter, you need to put negative 13. So it's not about 3 minus 13. It's about 3 multiplying by 13. So I'm going to put the dot in between these two parentheses. And there is a plus sign. So I'm going to put the plus. And the last letter is a G again, which is number 3. I'm going to put inside of parentheses. So in this case, you guys have to be very careful. If two letters are together like this, and there is a no sign in between, that means it's a multiplication. Okay, so 3 times negative 13, and it becomes negative 39. Okay, and negative 39, and you have plus 3. So now you can do the addition. So that becomes negative 36. Okay, so this is the one IXL practice that you will do today. So I picked like the different kind of questions that you may see in the practice. So these are the kind of questions that you may see in your practices. Okay, so on the next slide, this is the another one. So if you guys remember the absolute value, so sometimes that absolute value parentheses may come into expressions, and the meaning of absolute value, it's the same thing. What it does like everything positive, whatever you see inside of that absolute value parentheses. For example, let me show you in this the samples on this slide. So the first one, it says if H is equal negative 7. So instead of letter H, I need to replace it with negative 7. So I'm going to open up my absolute value parentheses, which is a straight brackets. Inside of straight brackets, I need to put the value for H, which is negative 7. I'm going to write it down, negative 7. And there is a plus 1. Okay. So whatever inside of absolute value parentheses, it becomes positive, which means it becomes 7 itself, right? Not a negative 7. So and plus 1, that becomes 8. Okay. So that's the only thing you need to know. Number one, just replace the variable with the number value. Number two, just remember that absolute value parentheses, everything positive, whatever you see inside. And the next example, it says if W equal -2. Again, we will do the same thing. I'm going to open up the empty absolute value parentheses, and inside of that parentheses, there is a W. Instead of W, I'm going to replace with -2 because the value for W, it's a -2. And there is a +6 next to it. So I'm going to write it down as it is. And the value for -2, it's a +2, right? It makes positive, and just add the 6 to that number. So that becomes 8 again. Okay? Okay, let me put in a box so you can see the answers clearly. Okay? So next one, it says, if W is equal 4, what do you think the value for this one becomes? So you have to be very careful this time. This time, negative sign, it's outside of the absolute value parentheses. So you're not going to change that. And it's not affecting. So inside of absolute value parentheses, you're going to put the 4 and plus 17, okay? So the thing is, a lot of students may say, hey, the value for this one, it's a +4. So you don't have, you can ignore the negative sign. No, it's not. Because of this negative sign is outside of the parentheses, it's not affecting to 4. I know absolute value 4, it's a 4 itself, but because of the negative sign is outside, so it's still, you need to put in front of that 4, okay? And plus 17. So now you can do the addition. So -4 plus 17, it's a 13, right? So what do you need to remember is, I'm going to write it down with different color on the bottom. So there is a huge difference between these two. Like seeing a negative sign in front of the absolute value, look at this, in front of absolute value 4, the result is for this one, it's a -4. But if you see that negative sign is inside of absolute value parentheses like this, and the result would be +4. So that's the difference. If you see negative sign outside of the parentheses, it's still, you need to put the negative sign in front of it. But if it's inside of parentheses like this, which means it becomes positive, okay? And there is one more example. Let me see, like negative sign and -4 inside. So there is 2 negative signs. So first of all, you need to simplify this one. So absolute value of -4, it's a +4, but still there is another negative sign in front of it. So you need to still put the negative sign in front of it. So these are the 3 different kind of examples that you may encounter in your IXL practices, okay? The last one is, it says W is 0 and the X is -14. So you need to replace those letters with these numbers. So W is 0, absolute value 0, and plus, so the X is, there is no absolute value. So you're going to open up the regular parentheses and -14. And now you need to simplify this. Absolute value 0, it's a 0. It's a 0 plus -14. And anything, if you add anything with 0, it becomes itself. So it's a -14 again. Okay. So this is the second IXL practice that you will do in this lesson. So yeah, this is the end of the instruction part. I know we already learned this before, and we just applied this into different context, which is absolute value expressions. Okay. The last thing I want to do is before we start on IXL practices, it's a benchmark type question. So I picked another one. And in this example, it says which expression is equivalent to given this one. So basically it says what happens if you simplify this. So all you need to do is find out the like terms. For example, the first one, it's a number, right? It's a 4.8. I'm gonna put inside of circle. And is there any other number itself? And there is a 2.4, the number that doesn't have a variable. So we call this constant, okay? And hold on. So the second thing, you guys need to remember the other like terms. So it's a 2.2W. This is a W term. And is there any other one? Yes, there is it's a 1.4W. And now we have 2 different kind of like terms. So let's start with the variable one. Always when you add or subtract, you have to be careful what sign in front of those terms has, right? So 2.2, it's a positive, as you see. 2.2 is positive, and 1.4, it's a negative because in front of that number there is a negative sign. So 2.2 minus 1.4, that becomes 0.8. And because if you're working on W term, you need to put the W next to it. Okay, so this is the number one. And number two, so you have 4.8, and in front of 4.8 there is a no sign, that means positive. In front of 2.4 there is a plus sign, which is positive, so you need to add them up. 4.8 plus 2.4, that becomes plus positive 12. There is a decimal point, and 7.2. Okay, so yeah, this is kind of another type of problem that you may see in your benchmark. So all you gotta do is determine which terms are like term, and the second thing is combine them by looking at the sign in front of those terms. Like if positive, assume that it's positive number. If there is a negative sign, assume that it's a negative or subtraction sign. Okay. So yeah, this is the last one. Now I'm gonna enable the chat box. You guys can ask questions. Okay. So while you're doing that, there is two practices that you need to do today. So it's a R5 and R6. So R5, as I showed you in the first slide, it's a multivariable expressions. R6, it's expressions with absolute value. So try those two practices by yourself. It's the same expectations, getting a score 70 or higher. And also I posted as an assignment in your Google Classroom. If you guys go in the classwork tab, and if you go this week's section, there is an assignment. So R5 and R6. Once you're done, make sure you turn in. Okay. So grading criteria, it's the same thing. Missing, you're not receiving any point. Incomplete, that means like if you below the 50 or around 50. If you turn in late, above 70, you're going to get 8 points for each one. And if you understand, or 70 or a little bit above, you're going to get 9 points, which is 90. And if you get masters, you're going to get 100 for all of them.